Hello. Today's discussion is part of a series where we're probing the elements of economic and community development, particular in historically isolated communities, community of color, and communities that have been impacted by some economic event. For instance, the coal field closures. Um, Traditionally, little attention is really paid to those kind of communities and figuring out ways to maintain economic resilience and to build them back from where they've fallen. West Virginia has selected to use tourism as one of its levers for economic development. Coming out of the McKinsey West Virginia Forward report, they have identified that as an important tool, but yet they have not identified cultural tourism as part of that effort. So we're here to discuss that today, and joining us, we have Ms. Jamila Jones, who is the founder of the Appalachian Trail. And then we've got Dr. Cicero Fain, who is the originator of the Black Appalachian Culture Center. So with that, I want to welcome you, and I'll serve as a host today. I'm Dr. Alan Letton, Director for the Center for Economic and Community Development in Black Appalachia and Isolated Communities. So with that, why don't we just start with each one of you giving us an idea of the projects that you're involved with. So let's start with you, Jamila, and then we'll go to Cicero.
Name's Jamila Jones. I'm the Executive Director of Innovative Community Solutions, and Innovative Community Solutions founded the Appalachian Trail Initiative. And what the Appalachian Trail is a community-rooted cultural heritage initiative that is designed as a strategy for rural economic growth. And it centers local leadership capacity development, inclusive tourism, and sustainable job creation. The initiative uses historic site activation, storytelling, entrepreneurship, and local leadership development to develop a scalable model that can be used as a blueprint in a regional area. We look at what a community already has and leverage those existing assets, whether those are stories or physical sites, and we try to incorporate that into community economic development.
My initiative is very much associated and affiliated with Jamila's. I'm engaged in a couple of efforts to really animate and elevate a cultural tourism economic sector within Southern West Virginia and the tri-state area of Southern Ohio, Eastern Kentucky, and Southern West Virginia. My first endeavor is I'm an assistant director of research and outreach for the Appalachian Freedom Heritage Initiative, which is a 9-county, 3-state initiative funded by a $1.75 million grant from the Appalachian Regional Commission to document, identify, and verify previously unknown sites to the national network, Underground Railroad National Network to Freedom. And we started this initiative back in December of 2022. We have now had 3 sites approved. In July of this year, December of this year, past year, and we now have 7 sites currently under review. 2 of them within West Virginia and Cabell County will to be, when they are approved, because they will be approved, that will nearly double the sites on the Underground Railroad within the state of West Virginia. As a comparison, Ohio has 103 sites on a national network. West Virginia currently has 3.
Yeah.
This is shameful. And so then my other initiative is to utilize the envisioned Black Appalachian Culture Center as the hub of this developing cultural heritage tourism sector. Those are the 2 major endeavors.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Black Appalachian Cultural Center? What is it meant to entail as it gets developed here?
Well, the goal is to really just celebrate the stories, experience, and contributions of Black West Virginians and Black Appalachians to the American narrative, to the American story. And folk, both Black and white, do not know the rich and unique history of West Virginia independently, but also that of Black Appalachians writ large. I want to make sure that folks understand the importance of, for example, Booker T. Washington, Carter G. Woodson, and Henry Louis Gates as being inarguably the most important historians of their generation, and that they all came from West Virginia, just as an example.
So we've talked about the cultural part of this, but one of the things we've talked about this, off mic, is the real importance to this to make it sustainable, to make it work, is it has to become an economic driver, right? So it has to have an economic impact. So in
Right.
terms of your projects, how does that do that? Let's start with you, Jamila.
No, my project is, in its nascent phase, really at the beginning stages of development, I can say that it affects economic impact in the learning that I'm undergoing. I'm effectively learning to become a property developer. I'm effectively learning to project manage construction projects. As I'm revitalizing these physical sites, I'm able to share that information with my community. I'm able to help them revitalize their sites. And I think once you kind of revitalize those sites, like Dr. Fain said, you elevate and animate those sites, then we can leverage other programs to get younger kids in tourism so that they're docents, so that they can lead tours, so that, they can start small bus tour companies, their own, small businesses. Not only that, once we develop that foundation, like the infrastructure of it, it's not a physical trail, but there is infrastructure that has to be developed. Once that infrastructure is developed, we can look at leveraging festivals, events, and it just grows from there. And that's how it amplifies the economic impact of focusing on preservation for me.
You mentioned something I think is very interesting. Most people don't know this about cultural tourism and building this kind of interest. When you look at investors, when you think about this as an investor, you find out when you talk to investors, for instance, I talked to some of the investors working in Martinsburg and some that are working in Wheeling, and they really don't care too much about the project, right? They're more interested in how does that infrastructure generate revenue? What are the economic multipliers? So it puts a different lens on things. I know, Cicero, as you've been looking at the Black Appalachian Culture Center, you've had to learn to start thinking about these kind of things. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. I mean, I'm a historian by training, so this is I'm putting on a whole new set of expectations and learning and education. What I've learned is that the primary driver is economic development, job creation, unquestionably. Initially, the Black Appalachian Culture Center, the idea would be to put it into the Fairfield West District of Huntington, which is the historic Black heart of Huntington. And then we realized that's just not going to be economically viable. So now the idea is to shift it over to downtown Huntington, near the population center, near the shops and commercial core, and also make it adjacent to Marshall University's developing innovation quarter. And so in that way, we can hopefully be the beneficiary of not only tourism into the downtown area, but also students and all the scholars and affiliated populations that flow into and out of Marshall. Um, and so I've learned, in essence, that we've got to make sure that this is a sustainable project. And best way to do that is to ensure that we are connected to people who are going to spend bucks, not necessarily travel to and fro. And I will say that the Underground Railroad project I'm involved in, we talk about animating this kind of heritage tourism. It will have markers that will be placed throughout the region. They will have QR codes. It will have maps and bios. And so, in essence, that anyone who travels into the region can look at that, go to that marker, get access to that QR code, and then say, "Hey, look, there are other locations in this network. Let's go visit them as well. In fact, maybe we should stay the night or 2 nights to really see the area and explore these connective tissue that binds this region in a way that I subscribe is unique."
Well, one of the things I've been fortunate about, I sit on the Keith Albee executive board, for example. We've been looking at how do you go out and justify a project like this, especially when
Mm.
you start getting to projects that are in millions of dollars. And one of the ways you do that is looking at economic impact, which is not something that we've traditionally thought about as we've done our cultural tourism. Some of the numbers on the average, cultural tourism will have for every dollar that you invest in, you get 8 to 18 times that money back on an annual basis. So that's where you get that economic impact, and you create a whole new vocabulary, a whole new set of skills. And Jamila, you had talked about some of those project management,
Mm.
things of that nature. I know that you spent some time learning about capital stack and new market tax credits. You want to speak about how important that is in all of this as well?
I did spend quite a bit of time with that and revisiting it as an alumni of the Federal Reserve Rural Investment Collaborative. And we keep in touch, which is good because it reinforces that learning for me. Um, and it always has that carrot that says, the funding is contingent on this being attractive to investors, and they really want to see how you articulate your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and how the dollars that they invest are going to be, grown, how you're going to service the debt, how are you going to pay back anything that's not a grant? Because grants alone, you can't have a stack just made up of all grants. That's like someone asked me what my capital stack looks like. I said it looks like Jenga, and you pull one piece out, and the whole thing just
Yeah.
falls apart.
Yeah.
And it has to be grants, it has to be philanthropic giving, it has to be maybe even loans from the bank. That's going to be at the lowest part for me because that gets paid back at the highest interest. But if you can't make it up, that capital stack comes in with grants, loans, but then you also have these tax credits, which I'm learning more and more about. And I sit on a couple of boards. I see other boards take advantage of these. Just 300,000. We can get tax credits 300,000, like, that'd be great for my project. Um, but how do we understand syndication? Who do we talk to? Where do you start? I will say collaborating and being on other boards gives me insight and additional knowledge into that institutional knowledge that our community historically just doesn't either have access to, or we just kind of are unaware of it. Not because anyone's keeping the information away, it's just different circles. And so I like to increase the circles that I'm in so that I can increase the knowledge that I attain.
Yeah, you talk about a very strong strategy that I
Mm.
agree. I don't see many in our community participate in. I've got a research group at Marshall where we're looking at what's the traditional capital stack look like for mid-sized projects. For 100, $200 million projects, that's a whole different type of investment structure. And honestly, that's easier money to get. But when you start looking at these 5 to 20, $5 to $30 million projects, now you're trying to do a capital stack. And I'm finding out, for instance, new market tax credits will make up 36 or 37% of your capital allocation that gets syndicated. Historic or building tax credits can add another, 20 or 30%, depending on where you are. But to your point, it's interesting. We looked at a project in Charleston that was a $20 million project, capital stack for new market and building tax credits covered about 55% of that. The rest of it was 38 different funding sources. And they were loans and they were grants and they were philanthropic. So you're right. The average structure is that. And I don't think we know that coming in. We're
Okay.
looking for that magic grant that's going to get everything. Y'all, this is a hustle. It's fundraising
Definitely.
and everything else. It's very hard.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
Yeah.
one of the things in terms of structure, both of you all have kind of hinted at, you need project management, you need all these other things. I think Cicero, I- I've watched what you've been doing with the Appalachian Cultural Center. What did you have to think differently about in terms of structure, in terms of, getting the right experience and right people on involved in your project to make it successful?
That's a very good question. Well, I had to surround myself with folks who have acumen and experiences and talent that I don't have. And I've been so gratified to have folks who have aligned themselves with the vision, who can inform and provide me counsel and guidance, and challenge me in a good way to continue to deepen my knowledge in arenas that I am ignorant about or underinformed about. And of course, I've hired, you know, this out of the Ross Group. I've got there's a museum conceptual design firm and their partner Consulticon who are doing marketing studies. And so their expertise has allowed me to kind of to grow, but also to kind of focus in on the deficits that I have, and then reach out to people who can shore up those deficits. So we are now, I mean, I think we are now a much leaner, at least in terms of vision, a machine, and I feel good about the direction. And what is, I'm also am grateful that their research has indicated to me that this is a viable project if these pieces of the puzzle fall into place. It's going to take some work, but this is not some pipe dream, not some fanciful kind of a thing. If you do the work, we get the right alignment, we get the capital stack or whatever, this can be achievable.
These are kind of topics of the conversation we'll be having on April 28th at the Bridging Innovation Conference. That Monday will be focused on Black business development, and this is one of the key focus areas in that conversation. So for those of you listening, I will encourage you to join us. There will be a QR code that you can scan and register for free to join us as well. I want to thank everybody for joining us in the conversation. I want to thank you all for participating.
Thank you, Alan, for the opportunity.
Okay.
Thanks. I can't wait to see everybody April 28th.
Indeed, yes. Look forward to it.
Sounds good. Thank you all.